The smell of roasted turkey hit before the front door even opened. Warm, buttery, with a hint of sage that curled into the air and clung to coats, scarves, and noses alike. It was Thanksgiving at Aunt Margaret's house, and that meant three things were guaranteed. The turkey would be perfect, the mashed potatoes would be lumpy, and, without fail, the pumpkin pie would mysteriously vanish before dessert. "Take off your shoes," Aunt Margaret hollered from the kitchen, though no one had even stepped through the doorway yet. That was just how she greeted people, a shout and a spoon in hand. The big old farmhouse groaned under the weight of family pouring in. Cousins, uncles, neighbors who weren't technically related but showed up every year anyway. Coats piled high on the guest bed. Someone's baby was already crying. And in the living room, Grandpa Joe had claimed the recliner like a king on his throne, holding the remote hostage with a stern look that dared anyone to challenge his authority over the football game. 13-year-old Claire ducked past him, clutching her backpack. She wasn't here for football, and she wasn't here for turkey. She was here for a mystery. This year, she and her cousin Lucas were going to solve the case of the vanishing pumpkin pie. The family had told the story so many times it had become tradition. Every year, one of Aunt Margaret's pumpkin pies would go missing before dessert. Not just a slice, the whole pie, sometimes from the cooling rack, sometimes from the fridge, once even from the oven before it had finished baking. Fingers were always pointed, Uncle Dan with his bottomless stomach, Cousin Maya who swore she was just checking the crust, even Grandpa Joe. But no one was ever caught, and the pie was never found. Lucas slid in through the mudroom, his cheeks red from the cold. "You brought the notebook?" he whispered as if they were spies meeting in a secret rendezvous. Claire nodded, tapping her backpack. "Operation Pie Patrol starts now." They grinned at each other, already buzzing with excitement. From the kitchen, Aunt Margaret's voice rose again. "Who wants to lick the spoon?" followed by a stampede of younger cousins. Pots clattered, laughter spilled down the hallway, and somewhere upstairs the plumbing gave a long, rattling sigh like the house itself was settling in for the holiday. Claire glanced at the kitchen door. "Think we'll catch the thief this year?" Lucas smirked. "Oh, we'll catch them. Even if we have to set pie traps." And somewhere, unseen, unheard, something tiny and glowing zipped across the top of the pantry door, leaving the faintest trail of golden sparkles in its wake. Thanksgiving had begun. Dinner wasn't even served yet, and already the dining room sounded like a courtroom. Accusations, denials, and loud opinions flew faster than Aunt Margaret's spoon. "I know it was you last year, Dan," Grandma said, pointing a wrinkled finger at her son. "I saw you sneaking into the kitchen after dinner." Uncle Dan, who was balancing a bread roll in one hand and his phone in the other, gasped in mock offense. "That was for seconds, on mashed potatoes. I don't even like pumpkin pie." "Ha!" Cousin Maya, the aspiring TikTok star, flipped her hair dramatically. "Nobody doesn't like pumpkin pie. That's suspicious right there." She lifted her phone, already recording. "Day 1 of my Thanksgiving investigation vlog," she narrated. "Prime suspect, Uncle Dan, a.k.a. Mr. Mashed Potatoes." Uncle Dan groaned and covered his face. Claire and Lucas exchanged a glance across the table. This was their chance to start gathering intel. Lucas flipped open his notebook under the tablecloth, pencil poised. He'd drawn a column labeled Suspects and another labeled Evidence. Claire leaned toward Cousin Emily, who was busy arranging her peas into a little smiley face on her plate. "What about you? Did you see anything last year?" Emily shrugged. "All I know is that I had exactly enough room for pie, and then, poof." She widened her eyes dramatically. "Gone, like it was abducted by pie aliens." Lucas scribbled in the notebook. "Emily believes in pie aliens. Unreliable witness." Meanwhile, Grandpa Joe cleared his throat like a judge about to bang a gavel. "If you ask me," he boomed, "this whole pie business is nothing but a prank. Back in my day, pies stayed put. Nobody went sneaking around like a bandit in the night." "But didn't you used to?" Aunt Margaret began, only for Grandpa Joe to wave her off with the remote. "Don't start, Margaret. I never stole pie, and I won't be accused of it now." Claire narrowed her eyes. Grandpa Joe was awfully defensive. Then the kitchen door banged open, and Aunt Margaret marched in with a tray of steaming sweet potatoes. "All right, enough of this nonsense," she said, setting them down. "This year, there will be no pie mysteries. I've baked 3, and I'm watching them like a hawk." "Yeah, we'll see about that," muttered Cousin Maya, narrating quietly into her phone. Claire sat back in her chair, mind racing. So many suspects, so many possible motives. Uncle Dan's appetite, Maya's craving for attention, Grandpa Joe's defensiveness. Even Emily's weird alien theory could be a cover-up. Lucas leaned close, whispering, "They all look guilty." Claire grinned. "Then we've got work to do." And while the family argued, the faintest sound drifted from the kitchen, a rustle, like something small moving across a countertop. No one noticed, except Claire, whose ears perked up. The pie thief was already in motion. Dinner stretched on the way it always did at Aunt Margaret's. Endless bowls passed back and forth, someone asking for just a sliver of turkey and then piling half the bird on their plate, Grandpa Joe groaning about the referee on TV, and kids sneaking extra rolls when they thought no one was watching. But Claire and Lucas barely touched their food. Their minds were spinning with strategy. If they were going to solve the vanishing pie mystery this year, they needed more than just suspicions. They needed a plan. When the last dish was scraped clean and Aunt Margaret bustled into the kitchen to start dessert prep, Claire nudged Lucas. "Operation Pie Patrol starts after dinner. Meet me in the den." Lucas gave a solemn nod and stuffed one last forkful of stuffing into his mouth like a soldier preparing for battle. The den was quieter than the chaos of the dining room. A fake log crackled in the fireplace, and the younger cousins were distracted by board games on the floor. Claire spread out the evidence notebook on the coffee table while Lucas fished through his backpack. "What have we got?" she asked. Lucas grinned, dumping out his loot. A small flashlight, a roll of duct tape, a toy walkie-talkie set, bright red, from when they were little, but still functional. And, with dramatic flair, an old small digital camera. Claire raised her eyebrows. "Nice. Old-school surveillance. Dad never figured out how to delete photos off this thing," Lucas said proudly. "Perfect for catching a thief red-handed." Claire added her contributions, a decoy pie tin lined with leftover crust, and a jar of glitter. Lucas blinked. "Glitter?" She smirked. "Think about it, if the thief touches the pie, they'll get sparkled. Easy to spot." Lucas scribbled notes. Trap A, decoy pie plus glitter. Trap B, camera in pantry. Trap C, walkie-talkie surveillance. They shook on it. This year, the pie wasn't going anywhere. After everyone was stuffed to the point of waddling and Aunt Margaret declared she was letting the pies cool just a little longer, the cousins went into stealth mode. Lucas taped the old camera to the pantry shelf, angled perfectly toward the cooling rack where 2 golden pumpkin pies sat gleaming under the light. Claire carefully slid the decoy pie into place next to them, sprinkling glitter across the crust like fairy dust. "Beautiful," Lucas whispered. "Now all we have to do is wait." They retreated to their surveillance post behind the couch, walkie-talkies buzzing softly between them. The house grew quieter as uncles drifted into turkey naps and little cousins curled up with blankets. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock and the muffled roar of the football game in the background. Claire's eyelids drooped, but she forced them open. She wasn't about to miss the action. Not this year. Then, rustle, clink. Her head snapped up. From the direction of the kitchen came a faint shuffle, like small feet on linoleum. "Lucas," she hissed into the walkie-talkie. "Do you hear that?" He answered back, his voice a crackle of excitement. "Target acquired." And in the pantry, the glitter on the decoy pie shimmered as though something unseen had brushed across it. Claire crept toward the kitchen, heart thudding louder than the squeaky floorboards beneath her socks. Lucas followed close behind, clutching the flashlight like it was Excalibur. The kitchen was dim except for the yellow glow above the stove. The pies sat on the cooling rack, steam rising faintly into the chilly air. The decoy pie glittered under the light, and yet something was wrong. "Look," Claire pointed to the counter. A thin trail of flour dust led away from the pies, across the counter, down a chair leg, and onto the floor. They crouched to examine it. At first glance, it looked like footprints. But not normal ones. These were tiny, smaller than a baby's hand, with strange little pointed toes. "Raccoon?" Lucas whispered. Claire shook her head. "Since when do raccoons open doors?" The trail ended at the pantry, where the camera still blinked silently. Lucas adjusted it and whispered, "If something's in there, we'll catch it." Just then, a sound drifted through the kitchen. Not a rustle, not a creak. A gobble. Both kids froze. It wasn't the booming gobble of a turkey, it was softer, almost squeaky, like someone trying to imitate a turkey but doing a terrible job. The sound came from above. Slowly, they lifted their eyes. The pantry door rattled, just once. And for the briefest moment, Claire swore she saw a flicker of golden light dart across the ceiling before vanishing into the shadows. Lucas's mouth fell open. That wasn't Uncle Dan. Claire's hand trembled as she wrote in the notebook. Clue number 1, tiny footprints. Clue number 2, Weird turkey gobble. Clue number 3, golden light. The cousins stood there, pie cooling, glitter sparkling, and the mystery deepening. Something was in the house. Something that liked pumpkin pie. By the time Aunt Margaret clanged her spoon against the side of her glass to announce dessert, the cousins were practically vibrating in their seats. The trap was set, the notebook was filling with clues, and the air was thick with suspense, not just because of the mystery, but also because everyone was way too full to move. Pie time, Aunt Margaret declared triumphantly, vanishing into the kitchen with a dramatic swish of her apron. And this year, nobody's getting their sticky fingers on them before I. She stopped mid-sentence. The family craned their necks toward the kitchen. Aunt Margaret's voice rose again, this time sharp enough to cut through the football commentary on TV. Where are my pies? Chairs screeched against the floor as everyone scrambled up. Grandpa Joe muttered something about every dang year, while Cousin Maya started recording immediately, narrating in her best dramatic TikTok voice, breaking news. The pumpkin pie has vanished again. Suspects are fleeing the scene. But no one was fleeing. Everyone crowded into the kitchen to see for themselves. The cooling rack was empty. All 3 pies, gone. A stunned silence fell. Then Uncle Dan broke it with a groan. Oh, come on, I was actually looking forward to dessert this year. Don't look at me, Maya squeaked, even though nobody had accused her yet. Claire and Lucas exchanged wide-eyed glances. This wasn't part of the plan. The pies weren't supposed to disappear, they were supposed to catch the thief before that happened. Lucas scrambled to the pantry, ripping the camera off the shelf. We've got the footage, he whispered. But just as he turned back toward the group, a faint shimmer drifted across the kitchen, like dust floating in sunlight, except glowing. For a heartbeat, Claire thought she saw something dart behind the fridge. Small, quick, flickering with golden sparks. Did you? Claire began. Yep, Lucas said quickly, eyes wide. Grandma crossed her arms. I'm telling you, it's Dan. Uncle Dan threw his arms up. Why is it always me? While the adults bickered, Claire and Lucas slipped out of the kitchen. Lucas clutched the camera like treasure. Claire whispered, if that thing actually caught what we think it did. Lucas grinned, his face glowing with the kind of excitement you only get from mystery. Then we're about to solve the case of the century. The cousins crept back to the den with the disposable camera, hiding away like detectives reviewing secret evidence. Lucas cracked open the back, hands shaking with anticipation. Okay, he whispered, if we actually caught it, this could be the smoking pie tin. They held their breath as he flipped through the tiny screen of snapshots, one by one. The first few were blurry, half a counter, the corner of the pie tin, Aunt Margaret's elbow. Then, whoa, Claire's voice dropped to a hush. The next photo showed something glowing. A faint golden blur hovering near the cooling rack, small as a squirrel, its outline fuzzy but unmistakably not human. Another shot, 2 tiny hands gripping the pie tin. Another, a trail of sparks falling like candlelight. And in the final frame, a perfect shot of the thief's face, caught mid-pie heist. It wasn't Uncle Dan, it wasn't Maya, it wasn't anyone human at all. The creature looked like a cross between a raccoon and a mischievous doll, with big shiny eyes and ears that curled like autumn leaves. Its grin was wide, toothy but not menacing, and its whole body glowed faintly, as though lit from within. Claire's jaw dropped. It's adorable. Lucas squinted. Adorable and guilty. A sudden thump echoed from downstairs, followed by Aunt Margaret's shriek. Something's under the table. The cousins bolted out of the room, clutching the photos. In the dining room, chaos reigned. Chairs had been shoved aside, the tablecloth rippled like something was crawling beneath it, and Cousin Emily was standing on her chair shouting, aliens. I told you. Before anyone could react, the tablecloth lifted, and out tumbled the glowing pie thief itself, clutching half a pumpkin pie in its glittery little hands. It blinked in the light of a dozen human eyes, crumbs smeared across its mischievous grin. The room went silent, then the sprite gave a sheepish little gobble. Grandma fainted into her chair. Uncle Dan dropped his fork. Maya screamed, this is going viral, and dove for her phone. And Claire, eyes wide with wonder, whispered the words she'd been waiting to say all night, case closed. The dining room stayed frozen for a long, awkward beat, everyone staring at the little glowing creature happily licking pumpkin filling off its fingers. Then Aunt Margaret, brandishing her wooden spoon like a weapon, stepped forward. All right, you, whatever you are, she said, her voice wavering between outrage and bewilderment, you've got exactly 3 seconds to explain yourself. The sprite blinked up at her, crumbs dusting its chin. Then, in the tiniest, squeakiest voice imaginable, it spoke, "Hungry." The room erupted. Grandma fanned herself with a napkin, muttering, "I knew I should have brought pecan pie." Cousin Maya screamed, "It talks," while trying to keep her phone camera steady. Uncle Dan rubbed his eyes. "Nope, nope, too much turkey. This is a hallucination." But Claire knelt closer, heart-hammering with excitement. "Wait, are you saying you've been the one taking the pies every year?" The sprite nodded, ears bobbing. Lucas leaned in. Why pumpkin pie?" At that, the creature's eyes glowed brighter, soft golden light shimmering like candle flames. It pressed its tiny hands together and squeaked, "Promise." The room went quiet. "Promise?" Aunt Margaret echoed. The sprite nodded again, then tapped its chest. "Great-great-grandma." Everyone turned to Grandma, who blinked in surprise. "What on earth are you looking at me for? I wasn't even born back then." But Claire's brain clicked. She remembered a story Grandma had told last Christmas, about her grandmother, Aunt Margaret's great-great-grandmother, who was famous for her pies. "Maybe," Claire said slowly, "your great-great-grandma made a deal with it." The sprite's ears perked. "Yes, cold winter, fire low." She shared. It mimed eating, then curled its little hands into a heart. Aunt Margaret's spoon clattered onto the table. "You're saying she fed you pie to keep you warm?" The sprite beamed, nodding so hard it nearly toppled over. "Every year. Slice for me, slice for family. Tradition." Claire's chest warmed. It wasn't just stealing, it was following an old pact, one the family had forgotten. "But," Lucas pointed out, "nobody's been saving you a slice anymore, right? So you had to steal the whole pie." The sprite gave a guilty shrug, cheeks glowing brighter. "Hungry." For the first time all evening, the dining room didn't feel chaotic. Everyone just stared, the truth settling over them like a blanket. This wasn't a monster. It was part of their family's history. Claire looked at Aunt Margaret. "So maybe all it wants is its own piece of pie." Aunt Margaret huffed, folding her arms. "Well, it could have just asked instead of causing 30 years of drama." The sprite tilted its head and gave the world's most pitiful little gobble. Aunt Margaret sighed. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Fine, someone cut the little rascal a slice before it eats my tablecloth." Uncle Dan, still looking like he wasn't sure if this was real life or a turkey-induced dream, carefully cut a neat triangle of pie and slid it onto a saucer. "Here you go, buddy." The sprite accepted the plate with both glowing hands like it had just been handed the crown jewels. It sat cross-legged right there on the tablecloth and dug in with tiny, greedy bites. Crumbs flew everywhere, but nobody complained. "Well, I'll be," Grandma whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "All those years of blaming Dan." "Hey," Dan said, but nobody was listening. Claire and Lucas sat shoulder to shoulder, grinning like detectives who had just cracked the biggest case of their lives. Claire whispered, "Guess we didn't just solve a mystery, we restored a tradition." Lucas puffed out his chest. "Operation Pie Patrol, success." Maya, of course, was still recording. "My followers are never going to believe this," she muttered, zooming in on the sprite's glowing ears. Aunt Margaret rubbed her temples. "All right, listen up, from now on, every Thanksgiving, I'll bake one extra pie just for whatever this thing is. But if it ever touches my pecan pie, I'm buying a mousetrap." The sprite looked up from its plate, cheeks stuffed, and squeaked, "Promise." Everyone laughed, even Grandpa Joe, who declared, "Well, if the pies stop vanishing, I don't care if it's a raccoon in a lightbulb costume." The rest of the night carried on in warm, pumpkin-scented peace. The family finally got to eat dessert without a dramatic disappearance, and the sprite curled up on the windowsill by the fire, humming softly with its belly full. Its glow lit the room like a flickering candle, cozy and calm. As people began packing up leftovers and bundling into coats, Claire glanced at the sprite, which had dozed off with a smudge of whipped cream on its nose. "See you next year," she whispered. It twitched an ear, gave a sleepy little gobble, and drifted back into dreams. Every Thanksgiving after that, Aunt Margaret set aside one small pumpkin pie, dusted with cinnamon and served on a saucer. And every year, right on cue, the little glowing sprite appeared to claim its share. The family stopped calling it the curse of the vanishing pie. Instead, they called it the guest of honor. And the pies never went missing again. Well, except once, when Uncle Dan got up for seconds. But that's another story. If you enjoyed this Thanksgiving mystery, don't let it vanish before you hit like. And don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise our little glowing friend might sneak off with your next slice of pumpkin pie. Stick around for more cozy mysteries, magical mayhem, and stories that feel just like fall.